Hello and welcome to another episode of the How to Create VR tutorial series, where you learn by watching other VR, AR, and MR professionals create the magic. I'm Marcelo Lewin, an immersive content specialist focused on e-learning and training. I'm also the creator and the guy behind howtocreatevr.com. My guest creator today is Dave Cardwell, a former visual effects artist for major film and television franchises such as Lord of the Rings and King Kong. As a visualization software expert, he went on to co-found and create Mudbox, which he later sold to Autodesk before joining SPINVR, where he began his work in virtual and augmented reality. Dave will give us an overview of how to use BrioVR, a WebVR software on the cloud, to create your next VR, AR, and 3D experience. But before we get started, I want to remind you to register at howtocreatevr.com. It's free, and registration gives you access to all our live events, tutorials, practice assets, podcast interviews, videos, and more. It's quick and easy. Just visit howtocreatevr.com and click on the Register for Free button. Finally, if you want to attend our live events in virtual reality, join us inside Altspace VR. Just visit howtocreatevr.com/AltspaceVR and subscribe to our channel. All right, Dave, welcome to the tutorial series.
Hey, Marcelo, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us here today. I'm looking forward to learning more about you and how you use BrioVR. But before we do that, give us a real quick background of yourself. How did you get into VR? And you mentioned you were in VFX. Why did you go from VFX to VR?
Well, I haven't really made a switch from VFX to VR. It's all sort of integrated, from my perspective anyway, in terms of artist visualization. And that's primarily what I'm interested in. Going back to Mudbox, as you mentioned, for me, it's all about creating tools that are very accessible for artists to use and to create something really, really cool. So for me, I haven't really made a jump. I'm just creating tools and technology that allow the artists to leverage and create something special.
So that's an interesting point, because what you're basically saying is any visual artist that's doing anything visually, they should be adding to their tool set VR and AR now.
Yeah, absolutely. I really believe that. VR, AR, they both allow you to visualize your creations at scale. They let you see things as they're meant to be seen in stereo. So it's just an amazing technology for an artist, I think.
Right, definitely. So since you've done a lot of VFX for filmmaking, has there been any specific skill as a filmmaker that has helped you when you started creating virtual reality experiences?
Absolutely. I think everything really translates really well. Everything you learn in VFX in terms of, color theory, design, anatomy, composition, and then all the technical things from animation to, creating good models, creating good textures, publishing, all that stuff translates really, really well. So you're going to be able to leverage everything from VFX that you've learned, or most everything, and apply that to creating VR experiences.
Any skill that has hurt you or you had to sort of unlearn?
I would say that one thing you have to get used to with the sort of VR workflow is that everything is real-time rendering as opposed to offline sort of software rendering. So there's some optimization that you have to learn to be more aware of. With VFX, a lot of times you're edge protecting your models. You're creating 4 and 6 times the amount of geometry that you need. So creating models and assets really for VR is more like creating game assets, I guess. You can still have really, really high fidelity, really, really good quality, but you just have to be more aware of what you're sort of putting into your scenes. Textures need to be power of 2 in size. It's, your models need to be optimized as possible. You can use techniques to bake from high poly to low poly, for example, to create normal maps that you use in the VR rendering platform. So there's some techniques there in terms of being less sloppy. I would say that in VFX, we're very sloppy.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot we could learn from games that we can apply towards film. And just being more efficient to have faster renders and that sort of thing. So I guess that's one thing you would have to learn.
You just have to be more efficient. It's kind of like the old days of programming on computers when you only had 5K or 10K versus now you have gigabytes of RAM memory.
Exactly. If you ever worked with developers, as I have, that are from the old school, 20 years ago, they're much more efficient than some of the young guys with now. It's just because they rely upon, all the tools and libraries. They're just more sloppy stuff that's out there. Nothing wrong with it. They're equally as intelligent. But I find that in terms of developers, some of the old school guys are much more efficient because they're used to working with, like you said, kilobytes and bytes.
Versus gigabytes, right?
Versus gigabytes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think any of this will change now that foveated rendering is becoming a reality, meaning that you'll be able to be a little more sloppy or do you think you have to be
maybe a little.
Just a little?
Maybe a little. I mean, hardware always gets faster, right? I mean, so like the processors on mobile phones are getting insanely fast. The foveated rendering helps. Yeah, I think hardware is always going to help. But of course, you're going to be able to deliver a better experience for your audience if it's running really, really smoothly. And that means being very efficient and a bit careful with your modeling and texturing process.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Dave. Well, I'm going to let you get started on the tutorial. And if I have any questions, I'll jump right in.
Okay. Welcome to this tutorial on Brio. I'm going to walk you guys through how to create sort of an interior visualization. This is a visualization that would be done, let's say, for an airport or something like that. We're just going to walk through creating a new project and then getting you into the Brio interface. So once you've created a profile, you've logged into BrioVR, you're going to be presented with this interface here. And you're going to want to go over and begin by creating a new project. So you're going to just click the new project button. And then we're going to present you with some templates that you can use to help you save some time creating things.
Quick question for you, Dave. I saw that you had shared with me. So are you able to share projects and those shared projects would show up in this project view?
Yeah, so once you create a project, you're able to share that with anyone in your enterprise group. So there are various levels of the BrioVR online web interface, or the web application, let's just say. So you've got a sort of a personal mode or a free mode, you've got a pro version, and then you've got an enterprise version. And with the enterprise version, the difference there is that you can go ahead and share projects amongst your team. But with any of the other versions, you can share projects with anyone in the world with just a link. So, and that's really one of the purposes of this application.
And that's view mode only, the ones that you can share with anybody in the world, as opposed to edit mode, right? Where you're sharing it in the enterprise.
That's right. So for the enterprise version, you can actually share it amongst your team and allow them to edit.
Got it.
But for the free and for the pro version, you can share with anyone and they can just view.
And can both of you guys be working at the same time in the same project?
Yes, so to speak, meaning you can make an edit and then someone else in the other side of the world can make an edit, but you can't like grab the same element at the same time.
Yeah.
So you have to wait. You have to basically take turns, if you will.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So what's going to happen here, once you get this template interface, you want to begin by selecting a blank template. So we're just going to select this template over here. I'm going to start off with this.
And while that template loads, are we able to create our own template and add them to the template library?
That is something we're looking at adding. Today, you can't add them to the library yet, but that's something that we're looking at. You do have a library, a personal library that you can add assets, and that's kind of stage one of us being able to allow you to do this.
Yeah.
But today, you can create a template for your team, let's say, or for a group of people or a group of artists that you may be working with, and you're able to share that template amongst, your group.
Right. Just share it as a regular project, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, cool.
So once the software loads, we start off with a blank template. You're going to be presented with this interface here. So let me just give you a little walk around. In the top left corner, you've got access to go back to basically where all your scenes are located. On the top right, you're going to have the publishing interface up top there, and then followed by the exporting. Export actually is a screenshot function. So if you press that, you can see what that looks like. So you can export high quality screenshots from there, to use for visualizations that way. And then you've got a button here that allows you to access your object list. And that's going to show you all the objects that are in the scene. So similar to something like Maya or Max, you've got a list there that you can control visibility of things. You can group objects and that sort of thing.
These are objects that are already in your scene, or these are objects in your library?
These are objects in your scene.
Got it. Yeah.
So that's what's in my scene now. You can see we've got the player camera, we've got a reference height, we've got the light system here. So those are objects that are in your scene currently. And as we add a few more elements in, you're going to see that list start to expand.
And I'm assuming each of those objects have properties that you can edit.
Each of the objects have properties, and I'll show you that next. If you select an object, you'll see a context menu that pops up to the right of the object, and this is where you can access many of the properties for it. So there's a tab underneath here that allows you to access, for example, the position and transformation attributes. There are some additional settings here for hiding and deleting, grouping and duplicating. And then these two white sort of circles here, there's a sort of a solid one, and then there's a checkered one. So that's the ability to change the colors. And if you have textures assigned like this object does, it will just tint the textures that are on the object currently. To the right of that, we've got more advanced material options, and we have some presets. You can see these material spheres that pop up. You can click the arrows to actually cycle through And we're actually building out this library. What's there now is kind of temporary, but you're going to see more materials appearing there soon.
Can you add your own materials?
Absolutely. You can build your own materials. To the right of this, we have a full sort of PBR standard material system. You can use sliders to build your own material, and then to the right here, you can save that material to your library. To the right here is the actual user library here for this particular scene. And we like to use Substance Designer, Substance Painter to create textures. If we're creating sort of custom textures, it's a really good application for that. And you're able to publish textures from Substance Designer or Substance Painter and then simply drag them into the slots here. Or you can press the upload button next to one of the channels and upload the texture there to use. At the bottom of this advanced materials menu, you have some pages here that allow you to access other parameters such as the HDR light strength that object is receiving, or being able to upload light maps. And that's one of the really cool things. You could bake a light map, let's just say in V-Ray or Octane Render or Redshift or something like that, and actually get that really high fidelity, high quality lighting and all the bounce and everything. And you can sort of overlay that on top of your model and then still be able to tile the textures underneath. So if you're looking for like a very photorealistic look, you'd want to use that sort of light map, these light map channels here for direct light and indirect light. Additionally, here we have some opacity controls. We have some alpha cutoff controls, and these are great for creating trees and that sort of thing. If you have an opacity map, just a black and white texture would do fine. And you can use these channels here to create those sort of effects. The last tab here, we have some triplanar projection options. So if you haven't created UVs, and you don't have software to create UVs, like for example, if you've exported a model from SketchUp or something like that and you haven't created UVs, you can use triplanar projection to still texture the surfaces and get a nice look. On this last tab also, you'll find the parameters for tiling the textures. That allows you to sort of repeat textures to actually get it to be denser, for example. So I've clicked this sandy beach preset, for example, on this particular surface here. And you can use the tiling, for example, to make it repeat more. So that's what that is here. Finishing up with the rest of the interface, we've got really important menus, the settings menu. So in the settings menu, you'd be able to access the transform options. So you have things like snapping, we have some rotation snapping, scale snapping, move snapping, but really important in here is the pivot point options. So with an object selected, you've got our transformation gizmo here. You can select this move pivot point, and then you get this sort of bounding box option, and you can click different corners of that to set the pivot point on those locations. Or you can just press, there's a button in here to center the pivot for the object here. So that's really handy. You're going to be using that a lot. Next to that is the rendering options. We've got some tone mapping settings in here, exposure, anti-aliasing, shadows, and that sort of thing. And many of the things that have to do with rendering, you're going to find in that rendering menu. And then there's some general options here to the right as well. So moving on to the right, just in the top corner there, you're going to see this question mark. And that actually is going to tell you about new features in the application. And you can also gain access to the tutorials page. So that's where you're going to find your help section. So moving on to sort of the meat of the application where you're going to spend a lot more of your time. In the bottom right-hand side, these are your viewing modes. So we start off with the builder view, what we call, and that's where you're sort of doing your editing. It's kind of like the third person view of the scene. And you notice there's this camera in here. That's actually where the player is going to be starting. So if you send a link to someone after you publish your scene, this is where they're going to start. It looks like I've still got my edit mode on. I'm just going to turn that off. Make sure that's off. Click to finish. All right.
And while you're doing that, I'm assuming you can have multiple cameras and set one as the default for the player mode.
Well, there's always one player camera, but you can have multiple positions and multiple camera cuts. And I will show you how that works here in a second. So from the builder mode, the next important thing is the player view. So if you click on player view, it'll actually teleport you down. See how there's a bit of an animation there? It actually lets you see what the viewer is going to see. So when you send a link to someone, this is what they're going to see. And that camera controls the player's body location. It doesn't control their head. So like you're able to look around wherever you want, right? And so that's what that is. If you have a VR headset connected to your computer at the time. Right now, I don't have one connected, but if I was running Steam and then I connected an HTC Vive, this button would become active, and then instantly I would have access to VR. And then to the right of that, if we were to view this scene on a, let's say, for example, a Google Pixel 3 phone, you could press this button, and that would give you instant access to augmented reality. Okay. And you don't need to do anything else. It's just purely on the viewer side. They have options to view your scene in these various different ways.
Quick question about the augmented reality view. If I'm making a full virtual reality experience that has a skybox, right, I'm fully enclosed in VR. How does the AR portion work? And just real quick.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different things. I mean, it's actually a sort of I guess I would say like an art form or a visual language that you could use. You could have an experience where you have a background here, or you're inside of an inverted sphere. And, it's a complete VR experience. You can't see outside of it.
Right.
But then you can use, we have some tools where you can fade out that sphere and then reveal the user's room.
Yeah.
So you can mix experiences that way. So it's a nice, and this is one of the cool things is like what's going on today with this type of
MR.
Just all the different sort of, I guess, artistic. We're developing new languages for telling stories that way, right?
Right. That makes sense. And I'm assuming your player is really what's doing that. So when I click on AR mode, the player says, "Hey, we're going to be in AR mode," and then there's code triggered in here that says, when you click on the AR mode, get rid of the skybox and do something else.
Yeah, well, there's nothing automated to do that, but it's up to you. We have a triggering system to allow that to happen. You can create a hotspot here where the user can walk into that hotspot, and then the sphere would disappear.
Oh, that's so cool. Oh, okay, I get it. Yep.
Yeah. So there's a number of different ways. You can have them pick up something and it disappears, or you can have them click something or look at something, and then that sphere disappears. So that's all up to you, and we'll be going through that Brio behavior system later on.
Excellent.
What you're going to notice at the bottom of the screen are your sort of play controls. So if we were to, let's just add some waypoints to this camera so we can see how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and click the waypoints button, and it toggles the mode to, you can notice my cursor changed to this little sort of teardrop shape. And what that's allowing me to do is get into a view, and I can then click and place a new waypoint. And so with that waypoint, it's got a few different parameters there. First of all, you can position the waypoint to look at what you want it to look at. And you can also set the mode to be slide, bounce, or teleport. And I'm going to show you the difference between the three of those. So I'm going to go ahead and place another waypoint and orient it. And we're going to place another one and face that. And I'm using this preview window down here is showing me what the active waypoint can see. So that's what that waypoint window is showing me down there at the bottom. And if I push play, you'll see the camera actually swing around and go through that experience. Okay. And I can click here to finish, and I can stop the experience. And if I go into the player view, if I push play again, I can then go on that roller coaster ride. So if you're doing a walkthrough through a scene like we're going to do later on, you'd be able to use the waypoints to actually do that, right? I just want to show you, because you asked earlier about multiple cameras. The way that you would achieve that effect is, for this waypoint, I'm going to allow the camera to slide to point 1. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select point 2. Just clicked an extra one by mistake. Select point 2. And we're going to change the mode from slide to teleport. So I'm just going to click on teleport, and you're going to notice that there's a dotted line now. And so now what's going to happen is, if we click to finish and then push play, there's actually a camera cut. Then it goes. So that's how you effectively achieve the illusion of multiple cameras in the scene, right? So you're just using the camera cuts or that teleport mode to actually create the illusion of multiple cameras. And it's really handy for creating walkthroughs, or like if you've got a model that you want to show off and just show the key angles of that model, that's a really useful tool for that.
So are waypoints only for cameras or for any object?
Waypoints are for cameras, but we do have another sort of point-to-point style of animation for objects.
Okay.
And that's under there's a move behavior that allows you to do that.
I see. So waypoints are almost like keyframes for cameras.
Yeah, they're kind of like keyframes, and it sort of sets up a motion path.
Right.
And you can edit the points along that motion path to get your viewer where you want them to be going. Now, going back to augmented reality, as you mentioned before, if you're planning for your viewer to have an AR experience, you wouldn't want to create a camera path that way, because we don't, obviously we can't teleport you around your house yet.
Right, yet.
So, yeah, yet. So you have to kind of think ahead a bit to how you want your viewer to experience what you're trying to show them, right? But that's that tool. So moving along, we've got our create menu. So we've got a number of primitives here. We've got text objects that you can create, for example, a bunch of primitive shapes. And then we even have a portal. And so that's like what the portal is kind of like a wormhole to another scene. So you can literally create a dozen Brio scenes and connect them all together. Or if you had different models that you wanted to show, you would use this portal, and you can actually allow your users to teleport from one scene to another that way. And so that's what that is.
And I'm assuming portals can be invisible, so they don't know that it's a portal, and they walk into this and they're transported somewhere else?
Yeah, you can do that.
Right, yes. Okay. Or you make them an object that they know that it's there, right?
That's right. You have an ability to change the little thumbnail that's on the portal itself.
Got it.
We have some mirror objects for doing like planar reflections. We'll go over that later. We've got reflection tools. So this is if you wanted to create, for example, a reflection probe. So let's say you've imported multiple objects, and if we placed a teapot here and we wanted the teapot to actually reflect the scene and the sky that we've actually created, you would actually create one of these reflection probes to do that. At the end here, we've got access to the treasure library. If you click that just does the same as this button here. And with the Brio treasure library, there's two sections to it. One is the sort of the assets that we've created and provided for you. There's several hundred assets in here that you can use, and then just sort of like drag them in from there, and then you can use that to get yourself going. And they're tools for you to use and help you save time in your workflow. The other thing is really cool. We have access to the entire Google Poly library. So if you've created an asset using Tilt Brush, or you've created an asset using Google Poly and you saved it under your Tilt Brush account, you can just search for that here directly and then drag in those assets into Brio and use those. And it's really cool because it gives you a different look than just your standard polygon look. So in this case, this looks like a Google a Google Poly model, so it is polygonal based. But if we were to, let's say if I were to type in, let me just type in alien in here. I'm looking for something that's got some effects and things like that. Yeah, here we go. So all the animation, and I'm just going to go and just briefly here into the environment tab and go down and change the background color to a darker color. And I'm going to press the G key to turn off the grid. And so you can see even all the animation from the Tilt Brush application, we read all of that, and you can sort of create a mashup of all of these Google Poly assets, right? And then create walkthroughs using the camera system and then share it with anyone. And you can also create an AR experience from that as well. And that's something that's very unique to this application, that you can just take those assets and instantly create an AR experience from there. So I'm just going to set my background back to lighter color and just keep moving on through the interface. In addition to, we were in the create menu, we've got this environment tab. So in the environment tab, you saw me edit it there. We edited the backdrop. You can also import your own HDRI images for lighting. You can select any of the presets that we have here, the background presets. And those background presets, we've sort of intentionally blurred them. But if you have, let's just say, I'm going to go back and create a sphere just so you can see what this does. I'm going to go ahead and set the metalness to 100 and then change the roughness. You can see now that sphere, if we change the roughness and make it more smooth, it's actually reflecting the environment at its full intensity. So you can import your own backdrops as backdrop images, or you can import your own HDRIs to use for lighting. You've got options for both of those. And just a little tip while I'm in here for the HDRI, to control the strength for an object, you have to go into the Material tab for that particular object, and you can turn down the strength of the HDRI itself. Okay, just so you know that it's there. So moving along from there, we've got our own custom lights that you can use for sort of industry standard lighting systems, sort of spotlights, area lights, point lights, directional lights, and ambient lights. And then what's really cool, we'll be looking more into this later. We've got our effects tab. And so with the effects, these are just like filters that you would have in, let's say, Instagram or something like that. And so there's a series of those here that you're going to use to really enhance the look of your images. From there, you've got on the bottom right there, we also have some links that you could send us emails, or you can chat with us on Discord Live. And so now that we've gone through many of the basic features of the application, I think we're ready to move on to building the rest of this project. Okay, now we're going to take some time and build out the rest of our scene here. So I'm going to start by going back to the Create menu, and you can either upload your model from here by pressing Upload, or you can just Alt-Tab, and in this case I'm going to use an FBX. Just drag it into the scene. You're going to get a pop-up that asks you about the scale of the model. This model is actually to scale already, so we're going to just press Continue. And then I'm going to use the middle mouse wheel to actually zoom out to reveal the rest of the scene. Okay.
Is there a shortcut to reveal the entire scene?
It's not that short though.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, but yes, there is. You can double click anything like in the object list.
And it'll bring focus to it.
Frame it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not like an F key, like I think in Unity you hit the F and.
Yeah, not right now.
Okay, sounds good.
So now that we've got the models in the scene, I'm just going to go back in and change my background color. So just to be more of a clean white coloration. And we're going to use some of the menus that we looked at before. I'm just going to start by applying, at this stage what you're going to be doing is assigning materials to your objects in your scene. So I'm going to start off with the cylinder here. I want this to be more of a chrome type look. So I'm just going to cycle through. I've got some chrome in here I'm going to use. So we're going to just press and make that chrome. And you can see it's reflecting that environment that we had selected before. We're going to go on and choose the sort of structure of the interior here, and we can just edit some of the colors. We can go in and play with the roughness of this and make it a little bit more shiny, more reflective. We've got our glass piece here. You can see in the object list how it's highlighted. One of the things that's a little bit different about Brio is that when you select an object, it actually will by default select the parent node. So as you can see, if I selected the building here, it actually selected the top group node. So just to be aware, and if you wanted to drill down in, you just simply click again in the interface to drill down in and select the actual object or the child node that you want to select. So that's one little point of difference between Brio and some other applications. For the glass, I'm just going to make it less rough because we can see some reflection in there. And we're going to change the color to be quite dark. And for this piece back here, I'm going to go with a wood texture for that. We're going to use the tiling to actually make it repeat a bit more. And for this part of the screen, just going to select this part of the screen, make sure I have that selected, the actual movie screen. I'm going to change that material to flat, and then we're going to upload a movie file. So I'm just going to click here next to the diffuse channel, and on my desktop, I've got a movie file that I want to upload to that. And you're going to notice the loading bar at the top. It's a good practice just to let the loading bar finish and do its thing, and it will have a pop-up at the bottom that says saved. And that's how you know it's actually saved to the cloud. I'm going to turn down the sound a bit on this. We're going to just press play to see what happens. So now when I press play, you can see we've got our camera move, and the video is actually playing on the screen.
Will the video loop automatically, or do you have control over that?
Yeah, you have control over that, so that if you select the panel again, just go here, and we go down into our behaviors section. We have a media behavior, and if you select the media behavior, you can actually press the loop button and cause it to loop multiple times.
I see.
If you want the video to play, let's say when the user walks into a certain location, you're able to do that as well.
Oh, okay.
And let me show you how to do that. We're going to set up our camera in a little bit different way that makes it more friendly for users. So I want to actually, one of the sort of powerful things about this tool is that we can go in and create interactivity. VR is more than just about looking at models. It's about the interactivity, right? So I'm just going to create a cylinder for this example here. And if we, just going to scale it, use the menu here to change different modes to scale. What I want to do is actually set this up so that when I click this cylinder, when the user clicks this cylinder, we're going to change the color on this object here. So we're going to start off with a trigger. We're going to use a click trigger, and I'm going to drag it onto the cylinder. And you can see there's a little storyboard in the behavior tray here that shows the cylinder itself. It's got a click trigger applied, and then it's asking me, it's red. It's asking me for what do I want to do next. And in this case, I actually want to use this behavior here called change color. And instead of dragging that onto the cylinder, I'm actually going to drag that onto this object over here. And so now I'm going to set a color, and we're going to go back and press play and see what happens. So if I now click this, you'll see that the color will change, right? So in this way, it's very easy to set up configurator, your VR scene, or to just create an experience. You may want to have a model that begins a turn or rotation when the user clicks something, and so you're going to use the behavior system to be able to do that.
Now that's a clicking if you're watching it on the browser. What about if you're inside VR? It would be like me touching it then?
Yeah. So for that, there would be another trigger that you would want to use, and it's called proximity. So just for example, I'm going to drag on and create another behavior chain next to this one. That's this little chain icon here. I can drag this icon on here. So I'm going to create a second chain. And with this trigger, by default, it's set to the player. So if the camera itself sort of walks into this space here, which you can set the radius of that, then we can cause something to happen. But to answer your question, if I turn this onto hand, if the controller, let's say you've got an HTC Vive, or you're designing this experience for someone to use on a Vive or an Oculus Rift or something like that, if this hand is turned on, if that enters the sphere, then the trigger would be set off. And you can also drag it onto particular objects as well. So if there are objects, let's say if you wanted to create like a mini puzzle game or something like that, you could drag this little node here on the objects, and that would cause the trigger to go off as well.
And now the trigger for the hand, if you're on Vive and Rift, obviously you have your controllers. What about if you're like in a standalone, like the Focus or the Oculus Go, where you have the the little slider? Will it work with those as well?
We do read those controllers, and for that you would use just the standard click. With those controllers, they have like a little ray, and you can point that ray at an object. And
so that's the click, basically.
Yeah, that would be the click in that case.
As opposed to the hand, right? Okay.
Yes, as opposed to the hand.
Got it.
There's a couple other options you can do there, but this is just the basics.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you guys offer gazing too, or no?
We do. So like if you wanted to, so you go in behaviors and look in the triggers, that would be the look at trigger. So that's your gaze. It's got a view fuse on it.
Ah, got it. Yeah.
It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. I'm assuming later on when eye tracking becomes fully available everywhere, with the Vive Pro Eye, you guys are going to offer that ability.
That's right. We try to stay up to date with the latest and greatest in terms of hardware. So we're always going to be updating. And once we get our hands on that, the new Vive with the eye tracking, I think we'll add in some features for that as well.
Yeah, cool.
So I'm just going to finish this up here, and I'm going to go back to my environment tab. And actually, no, I'm going to go create, and I'm going to put in, what always looks cool with these presentations is a reflective floor. So I'm just going to click this mirror button. We're going to click the scale node. And just let me change my background a little bit. It's so white that I can't see everything. And we're just going to scale that up. And with that floor, you see we've now got live reflections. And with this particular object, there's some unique properties. And so we've got this little wrench here when it's selected that you can click, and you can change the roughness of that. You can change it from being a perfect mirror to more like a floor-like surface. You can add textures to this mirror object. In fact, if I wanted to just use one of the templates, sort of material templates we have, we could add that in. So if I wanted to put some bricks on this.
Can you make objects rigid?
In terms of like physics, rigid?
Yeah, like we're not walking through the floor, not walking through walls.
You can. The way that works in Brio is that we have something called nav mesh, and it's more of creating a footprint on the ground. And based on that footprint, or whatever's got the nav mesh property on it, that's the only place that the player can walk.
I see. And can't go through it or anything.
Yeah. So like in the case of this, it's not a property on the glass. Let's just say that prevents you from walking through the glass. It's more of creating a floor piece that sets the legal areas that the user can walk.
Oh, I see. So it's really the floor piece itself would have the design of the area booth or whatever this is.
Yeah.
And you cannot walk through that.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's how that works in here.
That can get a little complicated because as we add objects, that means you have to change that mesh constantly.
You would. It's one of the challenges of VR because you can't really control where the user's head looks. Like you never can I can't stop you from looking at something or crashing your head through a piece of geometry. So there are other workarounds you can do. Let's just say, for example, let's say this piece here. If I went inside this, obviously I'm on the other side of the shading normal, so it looks like I'm just looking through the object.
Right.
What I could do is create a duplicate of that object and sort of inset faces a bit and then invert the normals. And so that when I put my head in here, it's just dark.
Right.
And so you're using positive and negative reinforcement to cause the user to choose to look in a certain area or to look in the right areas. Let's just say.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
So now that we've got this floor piece in there, I'm going to do a few things to the camera to make this, we want this to be a friendly experience. Let's just say we're making this for someone who's going to view this on a desktop. Like say you wanted to send a little presentation to someone. So I'm going to go ahead into the waypoints menu again. I'm going to select my camera. And under the master control, which is just, we're talking about the main camera here, you can click this little trash can and just delete those waypoints that I had on. And I'm going to click to finish, select the camera again, and I'm going to turn off the teleport. So this is the option that allows the user to sort of navigate using the controller stick in VR. For this experience, I want that to be off. Instead, I want to use this orbit camera. So I'm going to turn that on. And so with the orbit camera, you can see this, maybe you can see it, maybe hard to see on the recording, but there's a dotted line and there's a flag. And if you move the camera out from the flag, you can see a preview in the bottom corner here of what the camera is going to be seeing. And you can set the center point for the orbit navigation. And once you're done with that, let's just test it out and press play. And so now we've got this sort of automated orbit that's going on, but the user still has the ability to left mouse button, navigate around. And so that's the basics of how to create a really nice presentation from this. Sort of some finishing things would be to go back into the environments tab and add some effects, such as if we wanted to go ahead and put some vignetting on this, just to make it look a little bit nicer. You can see the preview of the effect is in this little window on the left-hand side, so you'll be able to see what goes on there. Just play around until you get something nice. Okay, now that we've gone through some of the basics of how to set up a scene and create a really nice visualization here, we're going to go ahead to the publishing step, and that's the part where you're going to get a link that you can send out to your fans and post anywhere you like. Now that we're done, we're going to go ahead and publish this scene. So we're going to start by going up to the Publish button in the top of the menu here. Just press Publish. We can give the scene a name. And you're going to have some options here depending on the type of account that you have. If you're using the free account, you're going to have the ability to share it with everyone publicly, but you won't have the ability to have password protection or private scenes. With the enterprise account, you're also going to have the ability to have custom branding. So that's the third tier type of account that you can have. But for what we're doing right now, we're just going to use the free public account and press publish. That's all you have to do. So once your scene is published, you'll be able to get a link to the scene. You can click this button here to copy the link. And then to preview what the scene is actually going to look like, you can actually just paste it into a tab. And that's really all you have to do to publish. And if you've ever published something in Unity to the App Store or something like that, it can be quite time consuming. And so that's where this tool is, again, really powerful, is that it's so easy to publish and then share with anyone.
Now, question for you on this. Let's say I want to share this with somebody that's inside an HMD. Are they going to have to open up a browser like Firefox in the HMD itself and like a standalone? Or do you have a Brio app that they can go to?
No, they would just use Firefox. If you turn on Firefox and you just have Steam running.
But that's for desktop. I'm talking about, let's say I'm on an Oculus Go, right, which is not desktop.
Okay, yeah. If on an Oculus Go, yes, you would run the browser inside the Go, and then you'd be able to
So
browse.
you still have to do that URL. Do you guys have any plans, and maybe you know, maybe you don't, but do you have any plans of doing like an app, so then when I share it, it can be where I just run it through an app, right, which is a little more seamless experience?
We are looking at that. You know, keep in mind, I think that all of the major platforms are looking at supporting the browsers in a very sort of seamless way as well, right? So we look at some of the talks from Magic Leap, even they're talking about browsers. So the browsers are really well supported on all the platforms, but we are looking at ways of possibly, enabling you to do sort of a custom app. The apps themselves have their own sort of headaches associated with them that we're trying to avoid.
Right. Plus maintenance and all that stuff.
Yeah, and then the sort of the app stores get 30% of your earnings and all these other things, right?
Right.
So Brio is about being able to share. You can share on your LinkedIn, you can share on your Twitter, anywhere you can post text. You can send it as a text message or an email campaign. So you can also embed this on your website as well. In the publish area there's a code there for your embed. You can also access the embed code here. Just click on the embed button and then type in the size, and you just get the code there. So you can embed that into a frame on your website as well. So it's just a variety of ways to share the experience. So that's literally all there is to publishing a scene in Brio. Marcelo, why don't you take it over from here?
Dave, thank you so much for participating in our tutorial today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Marcelo. It was really great to be able to share with everyone this process of creating visualizations for AR and VR.
Now, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that? Do you want to give an email, Twitter, URL, whatever you want?
Well, the best way would be to go over to BrioVR.com and click on the contact us there. We have an email contact and also a Discord contact where we're on sort of all day and just watching the forums and looking to help out everybody.
Very cool. Well, thanks again, Dave. And to the rest of you, I'm glad you were here with us. Just a quick reminder, if you want to access all of our live events, tutorials, practice assets, podcast interviews, videos, and more, register for free at howtocreatevr.com. It's quick and easy. Finally, if you want to attend our live events in virtual reality, join us inside AltSpaceVR. Just visit howtocreatevr.com/AltSpaceVR and subscribe to our channel. So until the next episode, I'm Marcelo Lewin. Cheers, everyone.